What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Big Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Thursday, August 18th, and this is an emergency podcast that will probably serve as Friday's podcast because it's in the afternoon when we're recording this. Deshaun Watson suspension has come down, and I don't believe has been officially announced by the NFL, but the Browns and Deshaun Watson have issued a statement, so close enough. 11 games suspension for Deshaun Watson and a $5 million fine. Joining me to break it down, Tyler Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, possibly Ryan Wilson and John Breech joining us after their other CBS Sports duties are done. Sully, what's up, man? How we doing?
What's going on, Will? How you doing?
Good. Yeah, no jovial, nothing jovial here. It's because it's a serious topic. I mean, and frankly, it's like I'm surprised. I really am. I thought that the NFL would push for a much longer suspension. I think it's pretty disappointing if you are someone who cares about the way that Deshaun Watson acted. And he has admitted since then that he has apologized. So like ipso facto admission, the NFL, and you know this, look like, and I pointed out that on field and off field are not, you can't conflate them, but it's like the NFL was willing to go to the Supreme Court to fight Tom Brady over 4 games for Deflategate. And this is where it is similar because you were talking about the reason the NFL settled 11 games is because it did not want to deal with the potential federal lawsuit that Deshaun Watson would file. Clearly they felt like he was going to file it. The NFL had offered him a 12-game suspension, a 12-game suspension as part of a settlement agreement during the initial process, and Watson turned it down. And now the NFL settling for 11 games. It's like, I think it's pretty weak sauce, frankly, by the NFL. Like, if I'm Deshaun Watson and I'm the Browns, I feel like we got away with something that we probably shouldn't have because you have 11 games. And by the way, he's going to return at Houston, and that game's on CBS. I'm sure it'll do like decent ratings. That's sort of beside the point. It's like it feels very ham-fisted, Sully, by the NFL to allow Deshaun Watson after what we had clearly determined. Everyone had clearly determined. Like Sue Robinson determined it. The NFL believed it. Watson did a lot of really bad stuff and affected a lot of people's lives and settled these lawsuits. It feels like he got away with something here to me.
Yeah, 100%. And the counterpoint from the league, what they're going to kind of spin on this is that it's the largest penalty suspension under the personal conduct policy, 11 games. It's, they're going to say it's unprecedented. They're going to say all this stuff, but everybody kind of felt like it should have been a full year. I mean, that was what the league, reportedly wanted. That's what they pushed out for. And anything coming off short of that was going to seem a little weak. And especially when you find out, like you said, that first game is going to be at Houston against the Texans. It's a little too on the nose. So where you say, okay, it's
like, do you like, it's like, do you want that? Like, you saw the schedule, you made the schedule yourself. It's like, it's like, you couldn't get 12. You couldn't just say, listen, I'm sorry, Deshaun, no fine. We'll donate $10 million. The NFL will donate $10 million to women's charities. And you're doing 12 games because you're not going to play in Houston.
Right.
In Houston. It's really bizarre. Now, I will also point out that the NFL definitely, this is signaling something that the NFL believed, which is that if the Roger Goodell's, what's his name, Judge, the guy who was going to issue the cane, or the guy who was about to issue the ruling, the guy who didn't have to issue the ruling, right?
Yeah, they beat him to the punch.
Well, no. Yes, they did, but he was going to. The issue here was he was going to have to issue a ruling that was probably in line with what the NFL wanted. And when he did that, and it was a full year because he's Roger Goodell's designee, he was going to have to deal with the NFL being sued by Deshaun Watson and then having to fight one bias from from Roger Goodell's designee to basically do whatever the NFL wanted. And then two, the stuff that Sue Robinson wrote about the precedent. And again, like, what Deshaun Watson did was unprecedented and deserved of a year suspension, at least. But the NFL, I think, looked at this and realized we may end up in a situation where after a year in court, he gets suspended for 12 games at most. potentially down to 6 just because of the precedent and what the NFL decided. And that it was better to walk away and settle. And so I understand why the NFL did this from a legal perspective, but it's like, man, you know what? Like for what? Like do the right thing. Like, I mean, just like hammer this guy and then figure the rest out later. Like you took Tom Brady to the Supreme Court. Like you're willing to take Tom Brady to the Supreme Court. Obviously, he didn't actually file with the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Over 4 games for Deflategate. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to convolute the two things, but it's like, dude, what do you stomping your feet and yelling about the year for if you're willing to take 11 games and $5 million? $5 million is just nothing for Deshaun Watson, and 11 games is a flat out W for the Browns and for Watson, because like they might very well be in the playoffs this year. I mean, it may be unlikely, but you get 6 games for Watson, and Jacoby Brissett can go, I don't know, 4-7, and you're in the playoffs. Like it's pretty weak.
Not only that, Will, it's the $5 million fine. And when you remember that Deshaun Watson, when he was negotiating this contract with the Cleveland Browns, they crafted it in such a way that they were bracing for this suspension. His base salary for this year is
making $47 million next year.
Yes, it is $690,000 this season.
Yeah.
So really, at the end of the day, in terms of money lost for Deshaun Watson, it's going to be around $5.6 million, which is, in terms of a $230 million contract, fully guaranteed, that's pennies on the dollar. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, if they decided to go to court after this NFL appeal and all that stuff, wouldn't have Watson been able to play?
Well,
it's very similar to Brady.
It would have been. It would have. We don't know, because the federal judge, whoever heard it, this hypothetical scenario, could have, in theory, granted him an injunction to play week 1. I think more likely he would have said, "Look, you agreed to 6 games in the first place. I'll give you an injunction week 7, but like we're going to hear that we need to look at this first, and that gives us time to look at it." So we don't know that. And yes, I think the point you're going to make, and we've made this, is if he played the full year, he could have lost $47 million next year. Now the Browns would have redone his contract in the NFL. It's just very, very surprising that the NFL was willing to take a half measure win here. And look, I mean, like I'm a middle-aged dude, like I'm disappointed with the NFL. Like it would be really tough to be like a female fan of the NFL right now. I think you look at it and be like what is, and again, like not that, I'm not correlating these two things at all, but if you go to the, NFL communications page, the last thing they published was the NFL hosts 3rd annual HBCU open house. And so, and again, like HBCU, Deshaun Watson, no correlation, but it's like, it feels like a lot of just like the NFL once again feels like they're just doing stuff to make themselves look good, and they're trying to just save face. And it's like when it all boils down to it, they're not willing to fight to actually, punish Deshaun Watson. It would be, Browns fans are a problem. I mean, watch how Browns fans react on Twitter, because they've been horrendous and heinous throughout most of this process. Like I said, anything less than 8 games would be a fat L for the NFL, and they like came after me like I was, I was a horrible person. And so, yeah, like I'm not trying to be like, on a moral high horse here, but
but the league talks kind of out of both sides of their mouth on this one, where it's, there's a million PSAs, there's stuff written on the sidelines, there's certain helmets and stuff being worn.
Breast Cancer Awareness Month,
all that kind of stuff. And then when you actually,
when the bleep hits the fan, it's like, are you
presented with those situations? It's, okay,
fight for this? Like, yeah, it's, yeah, I mean, it's like, and look, I understand from a legal perspective where the NFL probably was. And when you actually, and these things are so, it's annoying because you get into Goodell sits down with his army of lawyers and, his various, people who, his advisors, and they're like, look, the bottom line is we could go to federal court and we could end up having him play the whole year. We could end up having him, the lawsuit will linger over the entire 2022 calendar year. They don't want that. Clearly this is, deadline spur action, as Andrew Brandt likes to say. And, you would have you have to put the resources into fighting the lawsuit. You risk, the suspension being reduced by a federal court and all these other things. So I get from a pure black and white legal perspective why the NFL would be willing to settle on 11 games. But like the fact that he's coming back in Houston is so effing wild.
It's a
Like you
horrible
can't
look.
just be like, look, dude, we can't do
look.
11. We have to do 12. We have to do 12. We don't want you playing in Houston. We don't want you in Houston. You should be banned from Houston. And now maybe there's some stuff that will come out where it's like, I heard Adam Schefter say on ESPN that, there's a lot of talk about, counseling and therapy that he's going to have to do. And maybe it's possible that in order to be reinstated after 11 games, he has to meet certain criteria. We'll see how that plays out. But again, it feels very short, and I'm surprised that they took 11 games.
And the league has just come out and confirmed that it is, they've made the announcement. It's 11 games, $5 million, and all of that. So, now it's official. Roger Goodell said Deshaun is committed to doing the hard work on himself that is necessary for his return to the NFL. This settlement requires compliance with professional evaluation and treatment plan and significant fine of more substantial suspension. We're grateful to Judge Robinson and Peter Harvey for their efforts addressing this matter, which laid the foundation for reaching this conclusion.
Deshaun Watson actually speaking on NFL Network like immediately afterwards, and I'm not watching it, but I'm reading from Mike Garafolo tweet. I've always been able to, Deshaun Watson on why he accepted a settlement if he claims he's innocent. I've always been able to stand on my innocence and always said I never assaulted or disrespected anyone. But at the same point, I have to continue to push forward with my life and career. I mean, all due respect, that's bull. It's bull crap. Like if you're willing to take 11 games, you're willing to take an 11-game suspension and pay $5 million, which the Browns are probably going to pay for you because the Browns are clearly, willing to do whatever it takes to try to win, even at the expense of their the morality and the souls of I don't know that the Haslams are like living with like clean souls or whatever. Anyway, sorry, I'm not trying to. I mean, look, Jimmy D. Haslam are complicit in all of this. That's the bottom line too. But like Deshaun Watson, if you take 11 games and you pay somebody $5 million after you settled like 24 lawsuits, that is an admission of guilt. Like it's a tacit acknowledgement that you have done something wrong. Because if you were truly innocent, you would fight and fight and fight and fight. If you believed you did nothing wrong, that is not what this is. And that's the shame in all of this is that he's still going to act like he's innocent. And you know what? Guilty as charged here. Probably we're going to get 5 games in the NFL season. I'm not going to be thinking about Deshaun Watson. And that's just sort of a news cycle in the way that the NFL, once we get to week 13, that'll change, of course. But like, it's just sort of the way the news cycle in our brains work, and it sucks and it's unfortunate. But
not only that, Will, the more unfortunate thing too is you're talking about this season, like week 1 of 2023. No one's going to be talking. It's just it's just all right. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean,
nobody looks good in this scenario. The Browns, it's not like the Browns acquired him before all of this stuff was out there. Everything was laid out. Yep. It was all in front of them. They decided, you know what? Not only are we going to acquire this guy, we're going to give him an unprecedented $230 million deal, fully guaranteed contract.
It's like he's being rewarded along the way. It's crazy.
It's remarkable. It is a remarkable kind of turn of events with that.
It goes back to what Steve Keim once said, which is, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but if Hannibal Lecter could run a 4.54 or 4.3 40, he'd be on an NFL roster.
Yeah.
And that's it's the sad truth of the situation. I mean, I'm struggling to find, like, I feel like I do a pretty good job when we do these emergency podcasts or like writing stories about these breaking news things. We're like finding angles that are like, not unique or different, but like finding the different angles. I'm kind of struggling here, man, because it's like, okay, the NFL just didn't want to fight it and didn't believe that it could. Let me ask you this. Do you think the NFL believed that it could? Do you think the NFL was more worried about losing a federal lawsuit against Deshaun Watson or ending up with a similar result that we're at now, or more interested in just making it go away? Because I feel like it's probably like 40-60 in that sense, maybe.
So I think it's more they want it to just be done. I think they want a conclusion. I don't think they want this hanging over their heads.
Yeah.
Because think about it. If they go to the mat to the highest courts to go after Deshaun Watson and lose, Nobody is saying all of this stuff that they're saying about the NFL today. They go, all right, well, it's the court system.
You
It's not.
tried. Yeah, you did what you could. Yeah.
You did your best.
Your punishment and your precedents are all screwed up, and that's your fault, and that's how we got here. But it's like that stuff was dumb, not this stuff.
But then today, it's okay. You settle for the 11 games. Not only that, but you have a nice tip of the cap that he's coming back in Houston against his former team. For everybody's looking at that as saying like, oh, okay, that's just trying to take a December game against teams that probably won't have a great schedule, or the Texans aren't expected to be anything good, and if the Browns are rolling out with Jacoby Brissett, they're probably not going to be good. You're going to try to juice that game in terms of the ratings, and so that stuff again, it just makes everybody look particularly slimy. I mean, just look at what Roger Goodell said.
Well, I was going to point out really quickly on the. All right, so I think this is actually pretty important. That is a good point by Austin Gale of Pro Football Focus. Let's see. Did he change? Oh, he's at Ringer now. Sorry. Deshaun Watson needs to have full play status in 6 games in 2022 to accrue a season. Otherwise, his base salary would be $1 million for next year. So that's why he's coming back against the Texans. Basically, the NFL, the Watson's camp, the NFLPA was like, look, we'll settle 11. But we can't settle at 12. It was me, I guess. Like I don't. Like in other words, like they,
at that point, just give him 10. Right? I'm saying like the Texans thing is too on the nose for me.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
And this is just from Mike Garafolo from the NFL Network, just quoting Watson from this presser saying, "For everybody asks why he was apologizing." Deshaun Watson said, "For everybody that was affected by this situation, there were a lot of people that were triggered."
A lot of people that were triggered.
And that goes to the notion of a lack of remorse and lack of, any sort of empathy about the situation that happened. I mean, he did obviously, speak before the preseason game saying he was sorry, but like a little too late. And it just doesn't seem great. I mean, like I was saying earlier, look at what Roger Goodell said just a few weeks ago in Minneapolis during that owners meeting when they were confirming the Broncos ownership. He called Deshaun Watson's actions egregious, and he said he was presenting predatory behavior as he was asked about pushing the full season suspension. So how do you go from saying that one of your players in this situation is, egregious behavior, he's predatory, and then you go to just 11 games?
He just said a lot of people were triggered.
That's
like,
so
bro,
bad.
like there's no remorse, there's no contrition. There is absolutely zero belief that he did anything wrong. Who is coaching him on this PR too? Like, and I'm not saying that, but I mean, again, like it doesn't make it better if he's contrite and remorseful, but at least makes it a little bit like easier to stomach if he's like, I'm sorry to the people that I hurt. That one apology he gave when he was trying to get to a suspension or trying to get to a settlement, excuse me. Like that was the only time he's given a freaking bleep about. I'm coming very close to cussing on this podcast, which is whatever. But it's like this is the only time he's cared or pretended to care once in this entire process. And so it's very disturbing. It's sad that the NFL just got. I mean, it feels like the NFL got told like, all right, and look again. Like you go back to it, like. Because the NFL came out and said it's 6 games for non-violent, maximum 6-game suspension for non-violent, whatever, like
personal conduct policy,
yeah, the personal conduct policy, yeah, like domestic behavior. It's the NFL put itself in a corner like this by not being proactive once again, and that's what Sue Robinson pointed out in her ruling. Is like this is not a forward-facing league. This league reacts to whatever is happening, takes the news, and then tries to spin it the best way possible. It loves to float trial balloons of like what would work, and ultimately isn't progressive enough to see like that. And again, like nobody saw this coming, but it's like the NFL was not prepared for this in terms of building its precedent. Like you could have easily put, listen, if there are 6 games nonviolent is the max. However, if there are multiple infractions, yada, 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 there's many ways to be ahead of this.
But the other thing too is just this whole process has been so backwards from a protocol standpoint, where it's okay, you have an independent party doing the investigation in Sue Robinson, and what she says goes, basically. Outside of then, okay, we don't like the 6-game suspension. So then all of a sudden we're going to reverse it, and it goes into the power of Roger Goodell, but Roger Goodell doesn't want to make the decision. So he's going to appoint somebody else. And before that guy can make a decision, they're going to settle. It's like, why are we taking such a curvy road to this decision that should be cut and dry? If the league wants a full season suspension, they have the power to give him a full season suspension.
Fight for it. Again,
but what I'm saying is they don't even have to fight for it. They can appeal Sue Robinson's decision. Roger Goodell can appoint himself and just hand the
he didn't need a designee
down.
He didn't want to deal with the. They were trying to get around the bias of Goodell being the guy to give the 1-year suspension, and then it looked like Harvey wasn't going to. Maybe he wasn't going to give a year suspension. Maybe he was going to go 12 games, and maybe they knew that was coming down the pipe, and they realized that. They realized that was the case, and they decided, the NFLPA is like, look, we have to go 11 because we need to get that full year under his belt to keep the contract rolling. And the league was like, screw it. Like, and look, you can tell by the way that this is covered nationally. Listen to what people are saying. Like, it's like, this is best for all parties involved. Like, no, it's not. It's great for Deshaun Watson with the Browns.
Absolute win for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it's 11 games, dude. He could have been banned for life. Like Trevor Bauer got 2 years in the MLB for, I don't even know if I don't compare
sure,
bananas and watermelons, but the MLB was like, yeah, screw you, Trevor Bauer, 2 years. The NFL could have stepped up and said, listen, we understand that, what our policy was, what our precedent is. But frankly, this is so egregious and so predatory and so beyond anything that we could have possibly imagined that we are exercising our ability under the CBA to do what we want.
But I think we're also overlooking just, obviously we're talking about the 11 games and how that's not enough. They did him a favor financially. Like the NFL, by leaving it, like you were saying, to 6 games, they are allowing for that suspension or for the $1 million not to toll over into next year. He can now make all of that 40-something plus $1 million fully guaranteed next season, where there's no issues. And you're getting, again, a $5 million fine is a drop in the bucket compared to what he's making the rest of this contract.
John Breech joining us to jump on here. Breech, what's up, buddy? How we doing?
Hi, guys.
Yeah. Talk for a second while your volume heats up. It's weird. Like, I don't want to be like, hi, Breech. Great to see you again. It's been so long since I saw you in Nashville. Because this is not a pleasant podcast. It's the opposite of the Ryan Wilson tattoo podcast. By the way, did you see that tat, Sully?
Oh yeah, unbelievable.
Pretty good stuff, huh?
Great. Good for him.
So, Breech, what's look, I can sum up what we've been saying for the last 23 minutes pretty easily. What the bleep, NFL? This is shockingly low. I can't believe you settled 11 games and everyone's kind of disappointed, but people are going to try and spin it in a way that is good for everyone to make sure that the NFL saves face as much as it can.
Yeah, it's really weird that it is 11 games. I think Solly was just talking about the contract number and how if, it seems like Watson was not going to agree to anything over 12 because then his contract tolls because he doesn't play in at least 6 games. And so that was the line in the sand that his camp clearly drew because we're not, hey, if Deshaun is suspended 12 games, then his contract starts next year because you keep the same contract. You don't accrue your season free agency. And so it seems like the NFL maybe just didn't want to take this to federal court, didn't want this to linger, because that's the only reason you accept this. Because if Deshaun Watson's camp is going to fight you tooth and nail for a year-long suspension or anything 12 games or more, and so that's interesting because, we saw with Tom Brady, with Zeke Elliott, with Adrian Peterson, the NFL will gladly go to court with anyone. But maybe this was one of those just because of the severity of these accusations that you just don't want these pumped out all season, that's all anyone is talking about. And so if you're the NFL, let's close the door on it. He's doing 11 games. We got our $5 million. Let's move on and call it a day.
Well, and on that too, I would note that if you watch what happens in the NFL, and this is like an NFL level, team level, it is currently August 18th. NFL teams love to announce contracts on the eve of training camp, big contracts with their big star players, because it's like, it's so happy. The NFL wants to announce the NFL is like, and I mean, this is not uncommon for any corporation or any business. The NFL is very gung ho about celebrating the start of the season, and it is. I know this sounds like not conspiratorial, but like the NFL wants to get this out of the way with several weeks until the season begins. They want some runway, if you will, to do training camp, to do the preseason, to get ready to celebrate the start of the season. The NFL firmly believes, and we do celebrate the start of the season. It's awesome when football is here. It's great when football is here. The NFL doesn't want Deshaun Watson to be a talking point in week one, like leading up to week one, Sully, because the league believes that sort of discussion taints the magic and innocence of professional football beginning. It's a stupid, disingenuous idea, but it's true.
But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, too, that this is coming down on the day that week 2 of the NFL preseason is kicking off, and we have games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where by the time we get back here on Monday, start talking about more NFL, there's other storylines that are there.
Our next football podcast, we do a mailbag on Friday that comes out on Monday. On Monday, we're probably not going to talk about Deshaun Watson. And I mean, like, that's on us, I guess. But, the NFL understands very clearly, I think is your point, Sully, that actual football being played wipes away the interest in things that are going on off the field, especially when those things off the field have reached their their inevitable conclusion. Like, we were going to get a conclusion here at some point. It's just a matter of how long it wanted to string it out. And the NFL clearly believed that getting rid of it now, and it's like in 2000, it's 2022. It's true, but it's like basically started in 2016. Draw your own conclusions, however you like. It's like, okay, there's going to be something that's going to push this news out of our mindset, out of our collective mindset. And that's just the reality of it.
And the other thing, too, just to give a more clear timeline of what's going to happen now with Deshaun Watson, Adam Schefter has this. The suspension will begin on August 30th when they cut down the rosters. He may return to the team's facility and participate in limited activities on October 10th. On November 14th, he can resume practicing, and then he'll resume play on December 4th against the Houston Texans.
October 10th?
Yes, that's so. We're going to see Deshaun Watson back in the building on October 10th.
His actual suspension for away from the team is less than Stephen Ross's for the Dolphins. Like what? I mean, okay, whatever. Yeah, I mean
and that is weird. I'd like to see the explanation behind that, because usually if you are suspended, you return the Monday after your suspension ends. So if you're suspended 4 games, you are allowed to show up the Monday after week 4 ends and start practicing with your team. And so Watson clearly earned some sort of leeway in the settlement that he is allowed to show up a full 2 weeks to practice before his suspension ends.
And look, I'm not trying to call anybody specifically out here, but again, you can tell based on what happens, what is said, what the tone is from a certain segments of the media, particularly people who are like, look, you know what? Adam Schefter tweeted last Friday, Deshaun Watson made comments that the NFL thought were an important first step. The league still expects him to be fully compliant with treatment, accept accountability, and understand his behavior. Well, I mean, that's not happening. That's not happening. Tweeting that is disingenuous too. And then he added, NFL plans to use the full fine money of $7 million to invest in organizations that prevent sexual misconduct and sexual assault. Okay, great. Congratulations on doing that now, after the fact.
That's exactly what we said earlier, Will.
What is the point of a reparation? Like, you make $14 billion a year as an organization. You could have taken $7 million. You could take $70 million. It would be a drop in the bucket, and you could have spent that to prevent this stuff. And now you're doing it as a reactionary measure. It's insane. The league, my face is getting red. I'm so angry. The league does this every freaking time with all of these issues. It just doesn't have to be reactionary. If you have any sense of a moral compass, any sense of what is going on in society, you could have done this ahead of time. You didn't have to do it after the fact. And it's only doing it to try and quell a very clearly angry public and a fan base for this wildly popular professional sport that is not happy with what happened because the NFL was willing to settle with a guy who's clearly a predatory criminal.
And to that point, this is somebody who is not remorseful at all, which has also been kind of the issue. He's shooting himself in the foot every time the Browns let him. Yes, and the issue there is that, and the Browns owners use that in a statement when the first suspension came out. Like, triggered's not the word you should use, and then it's sexual assault. Like, of course, people are going to be. That's like, why are you so triggered? Because I shot you in the shoulder, man. Why are you upset?
But it's like egging them on. It's like they're the problem for being triggered by it. You know what I mean? Like that
Right,
phrase
exactly.
is just not. It just doesn't work.
And the other part of that is that
he showed remorse one time, and then he came back today, and he clearly was not showing remorse again. He's like, now that he signed the document, he's like, well, I'm not remorseful again. Guess what?
He just negated his apology because they asked him why he apologized, and that was the answer he gave. The triggered answer was the one he gave. So that means his apology means nothing because this is what he apologized for. And the other part is that, he continues to insist he's innocent, which, if he actually thinks that, that's one thing. But what you need to hear from him is, you know what? I understand the optics of hiring 24 women.
Protesting your innocence. You have agreed to a suspension. You've settled all these cases. You have agreed to pay $5 million or $7 million. What is the point?
And a very important fact here is that, Browns fans are like, well, 2 grand juries didn't indict him. A literal federal judge listened to this entire case and said he was clearly guilty, except she didn't give him a bigger punishment because the collective bargaining agreement didn't allow for her to do that in her eyes. But Correct. Otherwise, she agreed with everything the NFL argued, that he was a predator, that he had no remorse. So you can't be a Browns fan and throw this legal stuff out there because a federal judge says that
Browns fans are showing their ass this whole process in a really bad and ugly way. Like I quote tweeted Garoppolo. It was like literally unbelievable that he would say triggered. And somebody replied was like, oh, somebody's mad the Panthers didn't get Deshaun Watson. It's like, yeah. Like I give a crap whether the Panthers got Deshaun Watson or not. And like, again, I went on Cleveland radio and said, Browns fans have been, I don't say it's horrific human behavior, but it's like, really? Like this is what you're willing to, you're just, Deshaun Watson did nothing wrong. Like it's the whole thing is just very frustrating. I would not Breech. I said this earlier, but like I would not want to be a female NFL fan right now. Like I would not want to be
a female Browns fan would be the worst. And what's funny is you don't really get a sense. I talked to my dad when I was on vacation at the end of July, and we were talking a little bit about Watson, and I was like, Dad, you were a kicker in the NFL. If there's someone who needs massages, got to keep their legs fresh, probably kickers. Played for 14 years. How many people in 14 years did you go through getting massages?
Probably not 60.
One. Right. One in 14 years. So it's just, the numbers, 60. Yeah, it's just, they blow your mind that this has all come to this, and that he doesn't at least understand that this is not normal. You can't even get him to say that. That's the absurd part.
Yeah, at least be like, dude,
I know I was acting abnormal. This is not what normal quarterbacks do. You can't even get him to say that.
Didn't Big Ben go to sex rehab? Like at least Watson should have to go to massage therapy, sexual rehab, or like at least publicly. Tiger Woods had to go to sex rehab. I mean, Deshaun Watson, the counseling? No, it's not counseling. You need to go. You have an addiction to sexually assaulting masseuses. And you need to deal with that in a public, I'm not saying public shaming manner, but let's call it what it is. Everything's being swept under the rug and being described and treated in a way that is designed to whitewash the whole situation and move on for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's just kind of just gross. And again, not to put numbers or anything on it, but it's like there's 24 people accusing you of something. That's great. Like it's
Those
not
are
like
only
it's
the ones who came forward.
Right, exactly. And then who knows about what else happened. It's not, again, not to compare numbers, but it's not like this is a one-off situation where you're like, okay, something, happened. We don't know. There are 24 different people that say you did something.
It's like if you have a 10-year-old and your neighbor comes over and says, hey, your kid threw a rock through my window. You're like, nah, probably not. You saw someone else. But if 24 neighbors come over and all say, hey, we saw your kid throw a rock through our window. It was definitely your kid. Just accept it. And he's being like, no, that's not possible.
Yeah. I mean,
my kid can't even throw. There's no way.
The biggest irony in all of this, though, is that, the Browns are coming off an offseason where they wanted to move off of Baker Mayfield. And there were reports from the ownership or whoever that they said they wanted an adult in the room. They wanted to move off of Mayfield because of the immaturity, and they want someone who could lead the organization. Does this guy obviously just the off-field stuff, even put that to the side, how he's handled this situation in terms of publicly talking about it. Does that even sound like a leader at all when you're talking about like everybody's being triggered and stuff like that to me?
No,
Well, right. And think about all the stuff we're talking about. And these are all going to be talking points on the week leading up to December 4th, when he's going back to Houston, where all those accusations were made. And it just, that being his return game just blows my mind. I cannot believe the
Breech
NFL
was Austin, I think it was Austin Gale of The Ringer. We mentioned this before, but I don't know if you saw this or not. Watson needs 6 full
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But like we said, just make it 10 games then. Like it's too on the nose for this to happen.
I mean, I feel bad. I don't feel bad. It's like the CBS crew that's got to call that game. I mean, like you're like, well, we're here for a football game, but obviously that's not going to be what we talk about. Speaking of a football game, from a football perspective, and we've been ranting for like 35 minutes about the morality of it. And look, I don't want to act like I'm some squeaky clean choir boy who, but this is like a whole different, this is a whole different thing. It's like, it's disgusting human behavior, and it's being quasi rewarded by the NFL in a way that just shouldn't happen. But I'll tell you what, like if Deshaun Watson was a third string running back, he's not getting paid. He's not in the league. He's not ever playing football again. He's probably like, he's being prosecuted much more aggressively. And it is just one of the realities of the NFL and of the way this country operates, that if you are a superstar quarterback, you're going to get preferential treatment. Stephen O, it's a weird transition, but Stephen O has the Browns projected now for 8.6 wins, 16% chance to win the AFC North, 35% chance to make the playoffs, 1.1% chance to make the Super Bowl. They actually only go up 3.5 points per game scored with Deshaun Watson in the lineup. I won't be picking the Browns. I hope the Browns go 0-17. Like I hope they lose every game for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
I think too, like, again, that October 10th thing is so weird. It's almost like
bizarre.
It's like, well, you sat out all last year. It's a new team. We're going to let you practice for a month.
Well, that's what I mean. Like the NFL is doing him a solid financially, and then like giving him a brush time to come in and just be like, okay, here you go. Like a ramp up period. It's like, okay, like I don't know if he necessarily needs that. Like, what makes him any different than a guy like, great, for instance, like is DeAndre Hopkins going to get this for a PED suspension? Like, is he going to get this ramp up period? I don't think that's how that works.
Of course not. And Calvin really doesn't get to ramp up.
The ramp up period is mind blowing. I cannot believe they're giving him that.
It's very like, the NFL had the upper hand. They had all the leverage.
Yeah.
And they gave it away.
By the way, in terms of them, possibly losing games, in addition to the games that obviously he was going to get with the 6-game suspension, the new games that he's going to miss are at Baltimore versus Cincinnati, at Miami, at Buffalo versus Tampa Bay.
Yeah. So they play the Panthers in week 1, obviously, the Jets in week 2, the Steelers in week 3. I mean, look, the bottom line is if they could go 3-0 in those games, like it wouldn't be that crazy, even with Jacoby Brissett. And if they do, they're probably going to go to the playoffs. If they go 1-2, which I also think is possible, but then they're at Atlanta week 4. My gosh, look, this Browns team could be 4-0 without Watson.
But then it does get more difficult. I mean, you're playing the Chargers. I'm not going to.
Chargers, Pats at home, at Ravens, Bengals at home, week 9 bye, at Dolphins, at Bills, Bucks at home, and then Watson's back. So, all right. So let's say, what is their record? Again, we'll run through it again. At Panthers, I'm gonna do the math in your head. I'm gonna do the same. I would say I'm gonna take a loss at Panthers. I think Baker and the Panthers roll them. Jets at home, I'll say win. Steelers at home, I say loss. So I've got them 1-2 at Atlanta, 2-2. Chargers at home, Pats at home. I got them 2-4, 2-5 at Ravens. If this were a jovial podcast, I'd have them beating the Bengals at home. But it's not, so I'll have him losing. Although Joe Burrow looks incredibly skinny and his head does not fit his body. It's very bizarre because of the appendectomy. So I have him 2-6 going into the bye. At Miami, I'll give him a win, and then I'm going to say 3-9. Did I do the math right? 3-9.
That's 12 games.
3-9 with Watson coming back, which means they probably need to basically run the table. And they could be 4-8. I mean, but that's not an easy.
Brenton,
No,
I think
and
4-8
they could
feels like
lose that game.
well, that feels like the ceiling. I think 3-3 feels like the ceiling in the first 6 games, and then the new 5, 1-4, they're going to be lucky. I mean, that is a brutal run right there when you include games 6 through 11 or 7 through 11 that he wasn't suspended for before. I mean, the Ravens and Bengals, the Browns are going to be underdogs in all 5 of those games.
Yeah.
Jimmy Haslam was asked, this is via Aditi Kinkobala, was asked if he'd go back and sign Watson all over again. Absolutely. Adding, people deserve second chances. Does he get no chance to rehabilitate himself? And then said, we gave Kareem on a second chance. That's worked out pretty well.
And noted,
so tone deaf. What is wrong with you?
Kareem Hunt's second chance contract included $0 in guaranteed money.
Yeah, I mean,
treat them a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's like it's like, and John Dorsey was the guy who drafted Kareem Hunt and like was just knew he was good. And
I think Kareem Hunt got the veteran minimum, so he got paid a little over $1 million for his first year with the Browns.
Haslam's or something. All right, so what do you guys have? Breech, you said ceiling 4-8. What do you think the Browns are in Week 13 when Deshaun Watson returns at Houston?
I have the same record as you will, other than I think they lose that game to Miami.
Oh, so you got 2-10.
Yeah.
Okay, it's totally possible.
Woo-hoo.
I mean, this is a tough schedule. I mean,
if this is Jacoby Brissett, I mean, again, I don't know if this means Garoppolo's in play now because it's like double-digit games. I don't know any of that, but if we're talking Brissett, yeah, no, I see them not being a particularly good football team offensively.
Yeah.
They have to at least think about trading for Jimmy, right? You can't let Jacoby Brissett play.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the other. Well, so the problem is if you trade for Jimmy G, because you can't trade for him then cut him because like you wouldn't say his salary is guaranteed like I think the first day of the league, like 3 days before week 1 or something like that.
I think it's right after roster cuts, right?
Yeah, you'd be on the hook for Jimmy G for the full season. You'd have to cut Jacoby Brissett, which is kind of a shoddy move, but you would have to do it till because I'm trying to think, do they have anybody else besides? I mean, they have to think about trading for Jimmy G.
Yeah, isn't it Rosen? Don't they have Rosen?
Yeah, Dobbs and Rosen. So you could cut Dobbs or Rosen, and then you just have Brissett, Jimmy G, and Watson back when he comes back. And I mean, that's a pretty good quarterback room. And Watson hadn't played professional. He hadn't played a game of professional football since 2020. Like he could, and didn't he end the 2020 season getting injured?
Well,
yeah, I think that's right.
It was easily get hurt in the first game back at Houston.
It was 19 months between whenever he last played in that preseason game last week.
That's a long time to take actual NFL game hits. Like, and he's got 2 ACL tears in his career. Like Watson playing a quarter and then his season being over would not be that crazy. Like just because of that is a long time between playing NFL games.
But Garoppolo would be such a good fit because if you're the Browns, you're thinking Garoppolo's going into the final year of his contract. So you don't have to worry about any contract stuff. You bring him in, whatever, you pay him his $24.2 million because he's not going to accept a pay cut to go to Cleveland. And then look, boom, you don't have to worry about him at the end of the season because the contract expires. You let him walk off the free agency. You bring Watson back. It just seems like the cleanest thing for both parties, the Browns and Garoppolo.
I will say that
cut him though. Even if the 49ers cut him real quick, it's like if you're Garoppolo, you're looking at the landscape of the NFL. That's probably your best spot to catapult yourself outside of maybe Seattle because could present itself for multiple years. But that's a great spot to just say, hey, all right, let me just audition for 11 games.
One thing that's worth noting about the Browns and the 49ers trade, I firmly believe, and I respect this as a spiteful man, that Kyle Shanahan is a spiteful person. Jimmy Haslam and the Browns fired him in 2014. Like he may not be willing to help them out. He may be like, no, you can sign him. I mean, obviously you're going to take the draft pick if you can get anything out of it. The Browns don't have many draft picks, so they would probably do it. But I'm just saying, I think that's on the table that Kyle Shanahan's like, no, we're not trading you. We're not trading you to Cleveland. You want to go to Cleveland, Jimmy? Jimmy's like, no, not really. He's like, all right, cool. No Cleveland. So, all right. Anything else on Deshaun Watson?
Well, I'm just going to say, if you're the Browns, you do not want to wait for the 49ers to cut them. You want to, if you have to pry him away and overpay in a trade, because if you wait for the cut, you have 5 days of practice to get him prepped for week 1, or you just roll with Jacoby Brissett. And then that's one less game Jimmy's playing in. Why are you trading for Jimmy if you're already taking games away from him? So you need to get him in training camp as soon as possible so he can learn the offense.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And, if you wait till he gets cut, you got to deal with other potential suitors.
You run the risk.
Yeah, you run the risk of him going somewhere else like Seattle. And Zach Wilson is a great example of this. Zach Wilson, now the Jets probably won't trade for Jimmy G because Wilson's supposed to be back like 3 or 4 weeks in the season, or 2 or 3 weeks in the season. If another quarterback gets hurt and you're trying to play chicken with the 49ers, and somebody's like, screw it, we'll give you a second for Jimmy G, and all of a sudden you are out on Jimmy G when you could have had him for like a 4th or a 5th or whatever it ends up being. Yeah, I mean, if you're the Browns, you should do it right now. All right, that's it. Deshaun Watson suspended 11 games, fined $5 million. We all agree it's a joke. The NFL kowtowed to Watson, the Browns. I don't know. I mean, who knows? The NFL erroneously caved with their leverage, and now the Watson saga has reached its disappointing conclusion. For Sully, for Breech, I'm Brinson. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will see you guys later.